I'm Vonya Womack with Unknown Stories Untold. Afghanistan has had to endure 40 years of war, and that has led to a chronic poverty system, along with the numerous natural disasters they've had that are heavily related to climate change, and most recently, of course, with COVID. And that's added to the food scarcity, to isolation, to abuse, and to violent outbreaks that especially women and children have had to take the brunt for. All these things together have led to a huge explosion of what many of you are learning about for the first time right now. So way before this current escalation of violence, half of the population actually required some form of humanitarian assistance. I was able to learn some of the stories about some of the people in Afghanistan because I was able to spend some significant time with a group that worked in Afghanistan while I was in Libya. And learning about their support for women and children and the positive changes that they helped to create for them kept me reading more about Afghanistan and even teaching about it in my global leadership courses, where students learned about the life of men who've made a difference. Dan Terry, for example, who lived with his family for years in Afghanistan, was traveling with 9 other aid workers to distribute eye care when they were attacked and killed. Another guy on that trip was Glenn Lapp, who was a graduate of my alma mater and graduated 2 years before me from Eastern Mennonite University. And at that time that happened, that was considered the worst attack of aid workers in the country. So the reason that these aid workers did what they did is because they fell in love with the Afghan people and they wanted to help them. And it's stories like theirs and others who have loved the Afghan people that need to continue to be told, as well as the stories of those who suffer there in Afghanistan. So here we are, unfortunately, in 2021, on track for it to be the deadliest year for Afghan citizens in over a decade. Conflict and drought, they've created over 4 million people in crisis and displaced. And just in 2021, over 500,000 people have been displaced because of conflict. And that number is increasing every minute. Nearly 250,000 women and children have been forced to flee just since the end of May. In fact, Afghanistan has been the deadliest place for children, considered the deadliest place for children for the past 6 years. Women and children get the brunt of the violence, and they end up being half of all the civilian casualties. Add COVID-19 to that mix, to an already fractured and fragile country, and you get even more people that have to rely on humanitarian aid just to survive. Right now, we know that more and more people are seeking safety in Kabul and living in makeshift camps on the outskirts there of the capital. And they are just some of the 18.5 million Afghans who require urgent support in a country where 4 decades of violent conflict have resulted in this ever-looping need for humanitarian aid. On top of that, of course, COVID-19, and it's decimated, like I said, this already fragile economy, leaving more and more people at risk and causing more people to only be able to survive based on the humanitarian aid that they get. No one should turn their back on those 18.5 million Afghans who require support right now. Lives are at risk, and as we've seen here on our social media in the United States, TV and other forms of communication, anyone associated with the West is desperate, and they're in great fear of not just their own lives, but the lives of their families. Most Afghans can't leave the country through any kind of normal or regular way or channels. And we can see that clearly from what we saw just a few days ago, where masses of people were flooding the airport. And this shocked the world, and it spoke clearly of the sense of fear among so many Afghan citizens. Refugees from Afghanistan isn't something new to the rest of the world, because they've been having to flee ever since 1980 in the Soviet war and before. So many that had left at that period of time have never been able to return because of all of the security issues, obviously, that they would encounter. Over 1.5 million are located in Pakistan and nearly 900,000 in Iran, where they have difficulty, integrating into communities because they've got no access to legal services and or little money that they receive. In fact, according to UNHCR, the average wage is $2 a day. And these are things that are really common issues for many refugees all around the world. Our world leaders have to be engaged and work together because international pressure is urgently needed in order to help protect civilians and to enable aid workers to safely reach all those who need that support. So organizations like ours, Refugees Unknown Stories Untold, or RUSU, we tell the stories of these refugees and those displaced around the world to heighten the awareness of situations and to keep us connected to the humanity and the dignity that is lost for so many. Be sure to reach out to your constituents, the White House, aid agencies, give of your support so we can help to make a difference in the lives of those so desperately just seeking to live.